welcome you to this session of Refrigeration and Air-Conditioning. In this lecture, we will discuss the compressors which are used in refrigeration systems, what are the functions of the compressor, and apart from that, what are the various types of the compressors which are used in industrial as well as domestic applications. Now let us first go through the vapor compression refrigeration system that we have studied in unit number 2 also. Now we know that in a vapor compression refrigeration system we have 4 main components. First one we have compressor, second is condenser, third one is the throttling device, and fourth one is the evaporator. And different colors which are shown in this slide in the system represent the different conditions of the refrigerant as it flows into the vapor compression refrigeration system. Okay. And in this lecture, as I told you, that we will be discussing about the compressor only. So in this vapor compression refrigeration system, the low temperature, low pressure vapor enter into the compressor and it gets converted into high temperature and high pressure vapor refrigerant. Okay. And then it enters into the different parts about which we have discussed already in unit number 2. Now this slide shows that apart from the 4 main components that we have discussed in the previous slide, we have other number of controls and devices which are used for proper functioning of the refrigeration system. For example, we have here solenoid valve, accumulator, and then we have pressure regulators, and like these we have other number of controls that we will discuss later as we proceed into this unit. Okay, now let us talk about the compressors in detail. Okay, now let us first understand the functions of a compressor. Now, compressor is regarded as the heart of the refrigeration system because it pumps the low pressure vapor in low temperature condition to high pressure and high temperature condition, similar to that of the functioning of the heart in a human body, that is the pumping of the blood. Okay. So what I mean to say here is that compressor withdraws the cooled vapor which is in low temperature and low pressure condition from the evaporator, and it enters through the suction line into the compressor. Here the vapor refrigerant undergoes compression, isentropic compression ideally, but we know that in actual system the process is different from the ideal case. So after compression, the condition of the refrigerant changes to high pressure and high temperature condition. This refrigerant vapor may be superheated vapor, it may be saturated vapor, or it may be wet vapor, depending upon the inlet condition of the refrigerant vapor into the compressor. Okay. And finally, when the vapors are compressed by the compressor, the vapors of the refrigerant are delivered to the condenser via discharge line. Okay. Now let us discuss the classification of the compressor. Compressors are broadly classified based on 2 categories. First one we have the working principle. Based on working principle, they can be called as the positive displacement or it can be the dynamic one. You have studied in fluid machines also that the pumps can be classified into the two similar categories, positive displacement and dynamic kind of the pumps. Okay. Now similar to that case, the positive displacement compressors are those in which the refrigerant vapors are physically displaced by the moving part of the compressor, that is the piston displacing the physical boundary of the fluid. Whereas in case of the dynamic kind of the compressor, we have the action taking place between the moving blade and the fluid, that is the blade imparting the energy to the fluid in compressor. The positive displacement pump can be further classified into reciprocating or rotary, depending upon whether we have piston cylinder arrangement or we have the rotor kind of the arrangement inside the cylinder. And reciprocating kind of the compressor can be further classified into single acting or double acting. That is whether the fluid is on one side of the piston only or whether the fluid is present on both the sides of the piston. Then accordingly it will be called as single acting or double acting. And the rotary kind of the compressor can be classified into the vane type, scroll type, screw type or other parts which are mentioned here, depending upon the rotating element that is employed in the compressor. Now talking about the dynamic kind of the compressor, we have two main categories under this dynamic kind of compressor. First one we have axial and second one we have centrifugal kind of the compressor. And you know that in a centrifugal kind of the pumps, the centrifugal action is imparted to the fluid. Similar to here, the centrifugal action is being imparted to the refrigerant also. And second classification is based on the arrangement of the compressor and the motor which is used to run the compressor. First one we have open type, second one we have hermetic and third one we have semi-hermetic. Now this classification is based on whether we have different casing for motor and compressor or we have the single one casing for the motor as well as the compressor. That is the compressor and motor are housed in one casing. The details about this open type or hermetic type or maybe semi-hermetic type we will discuss later in the unit as we will move further. Now let us first understand the positive displacement of the compressor, that is positive displacement type of the compressor through the animation. So first one animation is of reciprocating compressor. As we can see here we have piston cylinder arrangement and we have the suction valve and the discharge valve. Okay, and two strokes taking place are suction stroke and you know that compression and discharge taking place simultaneously. Second type of positive displacement we have screw compressor. As you can see, the rotating element in this case of the compressor is the helical kind of the rotor. Okay, and the fluid which is entering in a blue color gets compressed as the rotor moves and changes into high pressure and high temperature condition as we have discussed during the functioning of the compressor. Here as you can see, the red color portion which is coming out of the compressor is that of the high temperature, high pressure refrigerant. The third one we have rotary vane kind of the compressor. Here as you can see we have the sliding vane inside the rotor and rotor is mounted eccentrically inside the cylinder. And blue color portion or a particle which are entering represent suction of the low temperature, low pressure refrigerant into the rotor, and as the rotor moves, the area goes on decreasing and the refrigerant gets compressed to high temperature, high pressure condition. Okay, so this was all about the working of the different kinds of the compressor. Now let us understand the different kinds of the compressor through the diagrams. As we can see here, we have the two different diagrams here. First diagram at the top represents the different parts of the reciprocating compressor, and we know that in this compressor we have the piston cylinder arrangement. As you can see here, we have a cylinder, we have piston also, and then in this case we have the motor, sometimes may also house inside the casing. Okay, and as far as the working principle of these compressors are concerned, we know that we have here the piston cylinder arrangement, and during the suction stroke, the piston moves from top dead center to bottom dead center. Okay, and this blue color portion represents that low temperature, low pressure refrigerant vapors are entering into the cylinder as the pressure inside the cylinder falls below that of the atmospheric. Okay, and on the right hand side, the diagram is of the compression and the discharge stroke simultaneously. Now in this stroke, the piston moves from bottom dead center towards top dead center. Now in this case, as you can see, the suction valve gets closed and the refrigerant vapors are compressed to high temperature and high pressure condition, and then it leaves the compressor through the discharge valve. Now next compressor, that is the screw compressor. Okay, now we have seen that this kind of the compressor in the animation also, and here we have seen that we have two different kinds of the rotors which are moving in opposite direction. Now one rotor is called as the male rotor, another one is called as the female rotor, and through the suction port the refrigerant vapor enters into the compressor and it gets trapped between the threads of the two mating threads, and then it gets compressed as it moves towards the discharge end of the compressor. Okay, the benefit or the advantages of such kind of compressor is that they have higher efficiency and low initial and maintenance cost. Okay, now this is the slide which is showing the working of the screw compressor, and as I discussed with you that in this case, as the rotor moves, the refrigerant gets compressed. So on the right hand side, as you can see, where we have A, B, C, D. In A portion represents that the refrigerant vapor has entered into the compressor, and as these rotating elements moves, that is these rotor move, the refrigerant gets compressed along the axis. The next one we have the rotary vane kind of the compressor. These are also called as the rotary vane kind of the compressor, and the vane here divides the cylinder space into the suction part and the discharge part. Let us understand this through the diagram. Now here, as you can see, we have the working of the rotary vane kind of the compressor. Okay, here the vane, as you can see, is dividing the cylinder space into the suction part and the discharge part, illustrated by the blue color and the yellow color. And as the rotor rotates, the refrigerant gets compressed from low pressure, low temperature condition to high pressure, high temperature condition. Rest we will discuss in the next lecture. Thank you.